This is Jacob with J&D Photography, and you are experiencing Sparking Fire, the podcast for innovative artists and entrepreneurs. I have with me as my special guest today, Lane Weichman with Lane Weichman Photo. And thank you so much for being on the show today.
Of course.
So Lane, let me just start off by asking, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I am a mom of 3 girls and have a husband, and I have a business.
Wonderful.
I guess that's it.
So tell me about Lane Weichman Photo.
So I do maternity, newborn babies, and families. That's all I do, unless it's like a friend or family. And I'm pretty much full-time. I don't do anything but this. I have a studio, and it keeps me really busy.
Awesome. So tell me about how you got into photography in the first place.
So I started in high school and college. I did photography, and it was all darkroom back then. And so I loved it. In college, I went to Montevallo for 2 years, and so that I was doing graphic design and photography, and it was all darkroom, like I said. And so I would work full time, and then I would be there all night long in the darkroom, and I just got super burnt out. And then I stopped, and then I met Josh, and he was kind of a hobbyist, but he had a camera, and so I picked it back up and just kind of went from there. Started taking pictures of my kids, and then people were like, hey, take my pictures of my kids. And I was like, I could make money from this. So from there, it just really picked up, I guess.
So you say it was like a natural transition for you to say, you started off doing this in high school and college, and then people started asking you to take photos.
Yes.
And it kind of transitioned from there.
Yeah, and it's something that, I've always been very passionate about art and been creative, even when I didn't do photography. There were a few years where I didn't touch a camera. I was so burnt out from, the process of darkroom and all of that, and I still had to do something creative. So I feel like I was going to end up doing this, regardless.
Yeah. So, there's so many genres in photography. So, what made you settle on families and family and newborn portraits?
I guess just because it's what I knew. I started with, my second daughter was 3 months old, and so she was just that perfect subject, because that's a really great age to start taking pictures. And so I would just document every month, and I loved it. And so I would buy new backdrops and stuff like that. And I did a few newborns early on, but that's something that's just so different, and I hated it for a while. So I did, I guess, just from people would ask me that were friends, and they all had families, so I would do families, and then maternity. It just kind of all goes together, I feel like for the most part, people don't just do newborns. They'll do newborns and babies and maternity, or the family in there. So I guess it just kind of naturally flowed that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I totally feel you on the newborn part, because I do maternity and families.
Yes.
But I actually have kind of a personal rule. Any child that's under 2 years old is going to be a special consideration.
Yeah.
I won't say no, but most of the newborn photos that I've done are for very close friends and family.
It's so different. There's nothing else like newborn photography. You can be the most incredible wedding photographer, but you put a newborn in front of you, you have to be trained to do that, and you have to research, and you have to learn how a baby moves, their anatomy, and how babies' legs don't move a certain way. And so you have to learn that, and you have to learn how to safely pose. I've had babies throw themselves out of buckets before, and if I weren't trained properly on that, they could have just fallen on the ground. And sometimes on the little beanbag, they'll just kick themselves off. So I feel it's just a different type of photography than anything else. And then it's all work and then pictures. So the work takes the most part. I'll set up a pose for 15 minutes, and it takes me 30 seconds to get the shot. So it's something that's different completely than anything else. And I think that's why I like it so much.
I've had similar experiences. The last newborn session that I remember doing, it was actually a couple of years ago. It took about an hour and a half for me to even start shooting.
Yeah.
And it was a setup, and getting getting the swaddling just right, and also the baby was really fussy. So I said hey, it doesn't matter how long it takes, because like you have to understand. Well, for those of you who are at home, that if a baby is fussy or crying, like you have to wait for them.
Yes.
And you have to be willing to give them the time that they need to calm down and kind of be restful and sleeping again. So the baby that I was working with, it took us like an hour and a half to get the baby settled again. But once she did, she was basically asleep.
Great.
She was great. But like I was looking at them because they were looking really worried. And they were like, "Oh no!" And just like, "Calm down, it's fine. We just gotta wait for her to calm down, and then we'll start shooting again."
Yes, and I've learned I've probably photographed 200 newborns. And I've really learned, like, there's only a few reasons why babies cry. And for the most part, I can settle. There are, sometimes if a baby, you're not going to get anything. And I'm like, you're very rarely, but it's just going to be, like, you can kind of call it early on, like, this is going to be really tough. But there's usually only a few reasons babies cry. And figuring that out and, like, knowing and how to work through that. And then for me, I'm a super calm person, at my work, maybe not at home all the time, but at work. So the parent feels really comfortable with me, and I can say give them tips, and for first time parents, I did it this way and this helped out, or usually, they're crying because of this. Why don't we try this? And I feel like that kind of puts them at ease. And they feel like, okay, you're good, and they don't get nervous. And usually, for years, I haven't had a parent that seemed nervous at all or not comfortable. So
yeah, and I totally appreciate your level of expertise, because I'm not nearly on your level. I'm looking around, seeing all this beautiful work and all the props and everything else, and I'm just like, that's one of the reasons why I only do
yes.
0 to 2 for friends and family.
Yeah.
But I would like to say that you as an independent business owner have a lot more freedom and flexibility to work with babies than more of an Olin Mills kind of situation.
Yes.
And I can speak from personal experience on that, because one of the first jobs I ever had as a photographer was as a mall photographer.
Yeah.
It's a long story, but I worked in one back in Atlanta about 9 or 10 years ago, and that was actually one of my first experiences of working with newborns. And they gave you some training on it, and told you how to swallow a baby, keep them calm and everything else. But I was just so disappointed with how we were expected to handle the session, because like I was saying before, babies need time. And they said, if it goes over 20 minutes, just cut it. And we would have to say, hey, I'm sorry, this isn't working. Can you come back another day? And it was just always that way, because it was all about turning over and getting the profit as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So with you, you have so much time to work with the kids and get better results. And I think both you and the clients would be happier with that.
Yes, and actually yesterday I had a newborn mini session, which generally those take about an hour and then you're done. But it took the baby about 45 minutes to eat, and I just kind of said this is going to go a long time. And I was telling my assistant, she was like, I think that was more of a full session because it took as long. And I said, but I knew that getting the results were more important, and for me, I would always rather spend an extra hour than have an unhappy client, because to me that is the most important thing, Yeah. But you're right, sometimes I'll be done with a complete full session in an hour and a half, and sometimes it takes 3. And it's just, you're never going to get the same baby, And I've never had the same baby ever. I've never had the same experience. It's always a little bit different.
That's very true. The demographics between 0 and 2, and just from month to month, is insanely different.
Yes.
You can go from 0 to 6 months, and then go from 6 to 1, and it's a totally different baby.
Yes,
it really is.
Absolutely.
And I've babysat for my nephew before, and just watching him grow up and go through all the developmental changes, and basically become a new person every time I saw him.
And you really can't tell from the newborn stage until the toddler stage what they're going to be like. Our third daughter was the best baby. I got newborn style pictures until she's 3 months old. I posed her all big and chunky, naked. And then she's the craziest little kid. I would have not have expected her to be wild like she is, but it's, like you said, their personality blooms so much.
Yeah.
Which is why I offer sessions for 3, 6, 9, and 12. And people want that because your kid changes so much. So it's something that's important, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I personally don't have any children of my own, but I'm sure that your experience as a parent gives you a very clear window into how kids change and grow up.
Yes.
Most of my knowledge of like kids, I've just learned from just being around them because I work with families and things like that. And I've watched my niece and nephew grow up, and my mom has actually been like a labor and delivery nurse for like 40 years now.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's incredible. So I do have some experience, but like, you have like firsthand experience that, most people just don't have. And I think that's very valuable.
Yes. And I think being a mom of 3 girls and have raised 3 kids, parents trust me, and just because I've dealt with it, time and time again. So mostly everything that somebody's going through, I've also been through. So I think that helps too.
But going back to like you being as an independent business owner, talk to me about like, the level of service that you can offer as opposed to like, a more corporate setting like Olin Mills.
I guess, everything's personalized for me. Like I have, for newborns, for example, I have a questionnaire. And so I find out like what poses of mine do you love? What poses do you hate? Which I still haven't had somebody say they hated a pose yet, because they're just like, it's my baby, they're cute. And then like colors, and so I'll have like requests, but like I get to like personalize piece by piece, like the props and the headbands and the hats and wraps and all of that, and the floor. And for me, that's like trying different things fulfills me creatively, but I guess something that's not offered any, somewhere else, that's just like your box store. Yeah. And then same with like cake smashes and baby sessions. Like when I inquire, or if somebody inquires with me and then they book, I ask them like, what's your inspiration? What's your birthday party theme? And then from there I'll say, well, I've done sessions like this, and I'll send them an example and say, but I'm thinking maybe we can do it this way or that way. And so like it's a 100% customized like experience, which is, and I have the time, because I am full time, I have the time to think and like be creative, where somebody who works a 9 to 5 and then does this on the weekends may not have that time either.
And that's absolutely true, especially with like the Olin Mills setting. Like I was saying before, I worked in that setting, and you were expected to do things like the same way every time.
Yes.
You really didn't have like a lot of creative freedom. So a lot of the photos, even though they might have turned out well, they were pretty much the same as everybody else's.
Yeah.
So it's really nice that you can offer that to your clients, like a very individualized experience and a very personal result.
Yes.
Because that's their kid. Like their kid is not like anybody else.
Yeah. When my oldest she's 11, and when she was a baby, it was Portrait Innovations. And so you just went there, and I still laugh at it, but like they never asked us like what we wanted. They put her on this like feather boa with like a cloud backdrop behind her, and it just cracks me up. And then they had like this satin sheet, and I'm sure they did every baby that came in that was her age. They went on the feather like boa thing. And
makes you wonder how many times they washed that.
I know. I don't know. Think about it. I hope they sanitized it.
Oh my gosh. But so one thing I was thinking about while we were talking is like, you ever see like the memes on Facebook of like the baby portraits, and it's like what people are expecting to get, and they go to someone who doesn't know what they're doing, and they're like, it's not it, and they're like, nailed it. And
yes, so, yeah. Expectation versus reality.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think those memes kind of speak to like, the level of professionalism that you and I offer.
Yes.
And just like our years of experience. It's not just about like going out and buying a camera, because anybody can do that. It's about knowing how babies are posed and how to light things and everything else. So like, talk to me about like, you started out in the darkroom in the film era, and you transitioned to digital. So talk to me about like your transition from like film to digital, and like what improvements you noticed. Like were you willing and ready to make that jump when it happens? Like
I guess I kind of separate the two, because there was a big gap, and so really when I did photography classes and all of that, I never did portraits. Like we just did like landscapes, and like we would be given like a task, and of course I was like, I don't need the studio photography class. I don't need that. And that's what I ended up for the most part doing. But it was very totally different. Like I didn't even think about photographing people, like strangely enough. And I guess my inspiration once I, switched, I guess I could say, or decided to pick it back up again, was just my kids. And so for me, it's really just two separate things completely. And I've tried to do film, and Josh has tried to talk me into it, and I just don't think I could anymore.
Yeah. Your commentary is very common. Like a lot of people who like grew up and like lived with film have told me that they would never go back again.
Yeah.
But it's kind of strange.
I would. I just don't necessarily. I get the art of it and it's beautiful and I love it, but when you're doing what I'm doing and you're shooting 400 pictures for a crazy toddler session with 4 kids, you just can't waste like that much money on film, you know?
Yeah. And it's funny because like if you look at like the early days of like newborn photography, like the babies were literally held in place to take the photos.
Yes.
And it's just because of the nature of film, you only have a few shots and like you can't waste film and things like that.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is, you know, the old timers, a lot of them are like, you couldn't pay me to go back. But like there's been like a renaissance in recent times. And I think Josh is part of that. That, you know, where people have kind of like discovered this art form. It's kind of like a lost art form. And they're very like romantic about it. And I've actually shot film a lot myself, you know, it's a lot of fun, but like you were saying, like, you know, when it comes down to brass tacks, you have to look at like the practical application of what you're doing. And if you can make it work for your business, great. But like, you know, I think for people like you and I, digital is kind of the way to go.
Yes. Yeah. He does so much, and he even does a lot of shots of our girls, and I love them, but I just can't, like. And my goal at some point was to try to shoot like family sessions, and I do have one that I don't even know where that roll of film is right now. But I think it's still in his camera. But it's just, it's harder. And I mean, it would be really neat to try a newborn with film. Like that would be really awesome because I could. Like that would be, I feel like that would be really simple.
Yeah.
Because for the most part, like yes, I'm like smoothing skin, but like all my shots, like I've train myself up to like what you see is what I've shot, with the exception of the skin, like because you're gonna have like, you know, spots that I'm editing out. But other than that, it might maybe I should try it one day.
But do you know a lady named Julie Summerall? She runs a company called Piper Vine.
Yeah.
I'm actually really good friends with her.
Yeah.
And she actually incorporates film into her wedding photography, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
So like, it's not everything that she does, but she loves it so much that she like, you know, throws it in as something like to kind of like differentiate herself as a photographer, and also just because she likes it.
Yeah. So, I wonder if that's something that now like a client is looking for.
Yeah.
Because there are other photographers in this area that like solely shoot film.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's something that's kind of even more so in like the coming years, if that'll be like a really big deal, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know, but maybe.
So you transitioned from film to digital, and so like talk to me about like, you know, learning about like studio techniques again, and like, you know, because you do a lot of your work like on set.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I did was we started it was before I had our third, so I started in my bedroom, our spare bedroom, and I used natural light, and I didn't really know what I was doing, and looking back at my pictures now, I'm like, oh my gosh, like they were all lit the wrong way, and so that was kind of like, I guess this was like 6-7 years ago, so this was more of like stuff starting to come out online, and there are like a few like bigger photographers that that posted videos that I could be like, okay, let me like learn about this. But then I reached a point where I was like, okay, I need to make a decision if I'm gonna try to like keep this at natural light or switch to studio. And so I found a friend of mine that does what I do up north in Pennsylvania. Me and her went to train together with 2 really big photographers. So we did like a 2-on-2 mentoring session. And so we spent like 2 days with them, or I guess it was just 1 day. But they taught us like how to properly handle babies, how to light shots, how to pose, how to like what to do, what not to do, like. And so like basically it was totally hands-on. Like they would set up the baby, we would shoot it, and they would be like, okay, you want to be higher or lower because of this, and like taught us like what angles are good for a baby. Like you don't ever want to shoot up a newborn's nose. Like every shot is either like face on or a little bit above, because you don't want to see a baby's nostrils. Like you don't want to see up their nose, or I guess anybody, you probably don't. But like there's just rules with newborn photography that I knew that like I would never, I mean at some point I might have, but like I wanted to learn properly and safety and or properly and safely how to shoot newborns. And so for me, learning that, and then they use Studio Light, so I made the switch at that point, like after they taught me. But I guess that's really how I like decided to do it that way.
Yeah. And that's really a great thing for you because, you know, a lot of people like myself, I'm actually self-taught. Like, I've only taken like a couple of like Studio Flash like classes.
Yeah.
And the one that I took for Studio Light, because I didn't, you know, the information just wasn't out there. I drove all the way to Atlanta to take like a 4-hour seminar because I was like, you know, what the hell am I doing out here?
Yeah.
So you had a similar experience, and it's really cool to see, like, you know, that there are still like mentors out there that you can reach out to, or classes that you can take.
Yes.
Because, you know, YouTube can only teach you so much.
Yes, especially with what I do. I mean, the newborn mentoring like community, it's almost to the point where so many people are teaching that like it's ridiculous. And we picked somebody based off of their work and what, you know, what we loved and what we wanted to like shoot like or similarly. But it's a little crazy now how like like everybody has action sets or presets, and I think now sometimes there's so many photographers that photographers are starting to try to make money from other photographers, and so like they're not busy enough, so then they're like, well, what can I do to like make money? And they're probably killing it too.
Yeah. The education field has grown tremendously. I remember even like, you know, 10 to 15 years ago, like all these classes and courses started coming out, and photographers saying, you know, come do this seminar.
Yeah.
Like even I'm starting to like do that. Like I just launched a studio lighting master class that I'm going to be putting on like next month.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I'm gonna take like 10 students, and that's it, because I want to keep the class small. And basically just go from like top to bottom, teaching everything I know about like studio lighting.
That's really neat.
Yeah.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
I feel like every couple of years I've tried to go to something else, because with newborns there's so many, like there's one photographer who they'll do really great like beanbag, like, you know, the simple backdrops, and there's other ones who do like wraps, and they're wrap masters. And so like every few years I've gone to somebody else just to like, the industry with newborn photography, I don't know if like wedding photography is this way, but it changes like every few years, like completely. Like it's just this like ever changing community, and I've tried to like, continuing education is really important to me because you have to stay on top of things, especially like now. Like I don't have newborns anymore. Like when mine was a baby, it was easy to be like, okay, well this is, because you're shopping for a baby and you're like looking for things, and now I'm like, okay, either I need to rely on my friends or like really to an extent pay attention just to like what, not obsess over the trends, because I don't think I'm like necessarily like a trendy newborn photographer, because there are like, they'll edit whatever's like the best new way to edit, like that's how they edit. Or like the newest props, which props are crazy expensive, and I'm like, I'm gonna invest in like something that's gonna last for a long time. But it's crazy.
Yeah. In the wedding industry, like there are trends as well, but I think they're a bit more stable than what you mentioned.
Yeah.
You know, because for the last decade, people have been just going crazy over barnyard weddings.
Yes.
I think that's kind of like fading out.
Yeah.
Because you used to see like burlap and like, you know, mason jars everywhere, but now people are like, oh, it's kind of like cliche now.
Yeah, that's true. Different.
But I think the cycle in weddings is more like every decade things will change, but it sounds like in your industry it's more like every like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. I mean, even if you look at 2 years ago, it's like this like crochet versus knit thing. Like back in the day, like when I started, like everybody wanted these like corny crochet hats. And now when people bring those in, I'm like, oh no. Like, do they know that like this is like 10 years ago, like was popular? But I mean, I do it anyways. But it's like the thing, it really does. It evolves very quickly.
Yeah. So going off of that question, so do you feel like you are beholden to any of the trends that are going on? Like you kind of have to shoot that way to stay relevant in the field?
I don't think so. I have always been as like, I feel like I edit pretty clean. Like I don't ever want like there's this trend right now that people are orange, like super duper orange.
Get out of here.
And I don't like that. Like
no.
I want my pictures to look like the people look like. Yeah. And like sometimes I'll do like a little bit like of a moodier edit or whatever, but for the most part, and my work has changed, but not necessarily for the trends, just because I've learned more about lighting, or I've learned more about like how to edit and things like that. But I don't necessarily feel like and sometimes something like really cute will like happen. I'm like, oh, I need that. Like, that's really cute. But for the most part, like all the props that I own are props that I will probably still use. I mean, unless the industry changes completely in like 10 years, you know?
Yeah.
Like they're just standard.
But speaking from that, from my experience, I try and keep my portfolio generally the same. And I really don't like the idea of like chasing a trend. Because, if you do end up chasing a trend, like your entire portfolio revolves around that, and then like you're stuck.
Yes.
So when the next trend comes around, you're like, oh crap, I gotta change everything.
Yes.
And so that portfolio you worked so hard on is suddenly irrelevant, and you have to start all over again.
Yeah.
So I think like you, I'm on the same page. It's better to have like a portfolio of clean images that you can work off of that are always going to be timeless.
Yeah. Even like my website, like I just now switched my website to a new one. But before then, there were shots from like when I first started. Yeah. Like and that was, almost 7 years ago. Like to me, that's showing that I haven't changed that much, I guess. Which I don't know I've improved, but I haven't changed like style-wise.
Right. Like the soul of your work is still there.
Yes.
And that's the important thing in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
So we can't talk about like newborn photography without talking about Ann Geddes.
I was obsessed with Ann Geddes as a kid. This has come up a few times. When I grew up, I had like 5 or 6 of her posters in my room. And recently I just correlated that I would sit there and just stare at those pictures as a kid. And I never connected it like until recently, but like I loved her stuff. Like it was the cutest ever. Mm-hmm. I think that's why I love like anything that's like classic, but like little bear bonnets. And like when our daughter was born, I had a little fox, like a tiny little like fox stuffed animal that she cuddled with, like in her newborn pictures. Like just the idea of like babies as animals is the cutest to me, probably because of her.
Yeah, I definitely think she made a huge impact in the industry itself.
Yes, she was probably the first, or the only for a while.
Mm-hmm. And I think people like Ann Geddes are very important because when you have a market that's kind of stagnant and like no one's doing anything like creative with it, that's an opportunity for someone to jump in and say, hey, like look what I can do.
Yeah.
And just really kind of make your mark in the world.
I can't imagine how hard that was for her though.
Yeah, it must be scary, right? Because you imagine like having an industry where like all the pictures are basically the same, and you want to go out like so far in left field.
She's like, I'm gonna take 20 babies and put them all in like a sunflower hat, and let's try to get a shot of all of them. And like in all her pictures, or some of the pictures, at least the ones I had, like there's like 1 or 2 babies crying, and I was obsessed with that as a kid. Like that was.
I know, but you never saw crying baby pictures.
Yes, right? And like it was okay.
Yeah.
Like in her pictures, and who knows like how much money she made off of like selling all these prints and stuff.
Exactly. And now we're kind of just following in her shadow, but now I kind of wonder like what's the next step? Like what do you think is like the next big thing in like newborn photography?
I don't know. Things change so I feel like every now and then somebody will just come out with like something new that nobody else has seen, and then they just trends. It's like slowly more people start doing it, and then like before you know it, everybody's done it. And it's the same thing with like that shot where like it's the eyes, like the close up.
Yeah.
Like one person did that.
Yeah.
And then whoever that is that's responsible for that, they're like, okay, every photographer has done that. Like how crazy is that to think about? Like it's just you get like that one super innovative, like creative thinker that thinks outside of the box, and then everybody wants to do what they do.
Yeah. I think it's a great point to mention that, you should never be afraid to try something.
Yes.
Like if you think, oh, that's not going to work, just take the picture anyway.
Yeah.
Because like, your clients might love it and you might become like the newest thing.
Yeah. I have worked really, really hard at trying to offer things that other people don't offer. So for like the last probably 2 years, I've just like pushed my limits and tried to come up with, not that they're like earth shattering, but something that nobody else does around here. Mm-hmm. And so and a lot of times I'll do something that like my girls love to do and kind of go from there, or, something that a client asks for, and then I kind of do my thing with it, and then I love it, and then end up, like I did these, which this is not like anything new, but I did like just simple headshots for kids. Yeah. And I sold like more of these sessions than probably anything else I've ever done. And they're just like literally, they're just kind of lit a little bit like shadowier and moodier and just basic. And it's just like I have the kids dressed in neutral clothes and it's just straight on with like a 2.0 f-stop. And people just love that. Like just the simple, and it's like a dark gray backdrop. And I don't think anybody else around here was doing, like, they're doing like adult headshots. But I hadn't seen anybody else do like kids. And people just loved those. Like even I did our girls and I loved them, although it was very difficult. But
it is. So kind of segueing off to a previous topic. So you came out of college and you started like taking pictures of your daughters, and then people started asking you to like take pictures of their kids. Talk to me about the growth of your business.
So, okay, I'm super type A, like to the extreme type A person. Like if I set my mind on something, like I'm going to do it to the extreme. And so I started, and basically I filled my head with everything I could possibly fill it with business related, learned about social media, learned about, what works, what doesn't work. Like the first 2 years of my business, I probably worked 60 hours a week. Like I just busted my, butt trying to feed myself. But the benefit to that is like if you work really, really hard for a long time, then you don't have to work as hard later. And so like now, even though I am full-time with the exception of like September through December, I probably only work like 20-ish hours a week. And now because I worked so hard early on and I taught, I researched how to edit and research videos and taught myself, I did a lot of shoots so that I could, like, what used to take me 6 or 7 hours to edit now takes me 30 minutes, And I feel like being a hard worker really pays off, just because if you fill your head with all the information that you possibly can early on, then later on you're gonna be like, okay, like I can do this. And so like now when I started, I could only take like 8-10 sessions a month, and now I did like 70.
Holy cow.
Yeah, in November last year, which Josh will tell you, I was a crazy person, but I did it. Like, I mean, I've kind of made a rule for myself in the last couple of years. Like, I don't work after my kids get home from school. I mean, if I have to go like do a shoot, and if I'm kind of crazy about, I shoot, I go home, and I post a sneak peek. Like, not everybody does that, and unless I've done like 20 sessions in a row and I'm super tired, or a wedding, which we haven't done in a long time and I'm thankful for. But I guess I just lost my train of thought. But what was I saying?
Oh, you're talking about work-life balance.
Yes. So I've really made it a goal to like, for a couple of years, we would get the kids to bed, I would go sit on my computer, and he would watch TV and fall asleep watching TV. And I was like, we don't ever hang out anymore. Like, this is my fault. And he never gave me a hard time about it. And he's a photographer too, so he gets it. Like, and he gets about as excited about things as I do. So like, I know when he goes and shoots, he's gonna come home and work on it. And I mean, it's kind of a great balance. But I was like, this is like not good. And so and even with my kids, and I'm so like one track mind. Like if I'm like, I need to get this done, then I'll sit on there and just the world kind of like falls away. And even though my computer's in like my living room and the kids are playing and talking to me and I'm interacting, I just had to like shut it off.
Yeah.
And so I really had to like learn to get really good about that, because you can really, especially as a person who is like very motivated, like I could work myself to death. And I kind of did. I've been really good about it in the past. Somehow I ended up with 70 sessions. Like, how does that happen? And I overbooked, and there were days where I worked like probably 16, 17-hour days, just sat there and got it done. And I did, but it was not fun.
Well, you're not alone. A lot of creatives that struggle with like work-life balance.
Yes.
And I've had moments when I've had to take a step back and say, is this really worth doing this? Because this Thanksgiving, it's crazy to talk about this, but I started like working with this guy shooting Indian weddings, and he had actually booked.
So cool.
It's really cool, a lot of work, but it's so much fun. But he had booked a wedding on Thanksgiving weekend. And I was supposed to be there on like Thursday, and Thanksgiving was on Thursday.
Yeah.
I didn't miss Thanksgiving, but I drove all the way from Birmingham to Chattanooga to be with my family for 3 hours. And then I drove back because my girlfriend was with me. I dropped her off in Birmingham, and then I immediately drove all the way from Birmingham to Charleston on the same day. And then the next day I shot for 3 days, like 12 hours a day.
And then you realize that it's not worth it. Like, it is not worth, like, I had to stop and say, this, no amount of money is worth missing my family's life. Like, and now, even years into it, I base my pricing off of how much does it cost to get me away from my family, and what's worth me spending an entire, like, if I do mini sessions out on a weekend, I'm not going to just do one mini session. You can't pay me for one mini session and expect me to be like gone away from my family all day. So if I do mini sessions on a weekend day, I'm going to work for 10 hours straight, and I'm going to make enough money to where like it's going to affect like our income, and it's not worth it. Mm-hmm. Your sanity is worth more than taking on all you can, And
especially like being with the ones that you love. Like, I love my family to death, and like, everybody's kind of getting older. My grandparents are in their 70s. My parents are getting into like their 60s.
Yeah.
And it's sad to think about it, but like, our time is limited.
Yes.
And I never want to come into a situation where I was like, I wish I would have spent more time
yes.
with them.
There's that saying that's like, nobody ever said, I wish I'd worked more.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's just not worth it.
And like, your job can replace you. You can always book another session, but you can't get your time back with the ones that you love.
Yeah.
And so that's why I try and make time to call my sister like once a week and just talk to everybody. And I feel bad because, everybody's like so far away in my family. My mom lives in Chattanooga, my dad lives in Orlando, and I might see them 4 or 5 times a year, and that's it, like in person. Like, we talk and everything, but it's not the same as like getting together and just spending time with each other.
Yeah, but you have the ability, the same as me, you have a very flexible schedule.
Yes.
And it's wonderful. Like, I go to all of my kids' stuff at school. Mm-hmm. Like, I never miss. Like, even if they have, like, the book fair. I go to the book fair and help them pick out a book because that's the benefit of my job. Like, I go to eat lunch with them, like, at least once a month because I can. Mm-hmm. And the hard part about that is that I book up 3 or 4 months in advance. So it drives him crazy, but very rarely. And I've kind of learned to try 1 weekend a month, I don't book anything. Yeah. And if it's one of the seasons where the sun sets later, you can really work on weeknights. Mm-hmm. But as long as I've got 1 or 2 weekends a month, like, I'm okay. But it really you have to schedule life in advance. And so I'm like, always, like, when I get my kids' school calendars, I start writing stuff in. Or like vacations, I'm like, okay, like, it's January, let's start talking about August and September. And he's like, no, I don't like to do that. And I'm like, I have to. Like, I can't go and reschedule something to a space that doesn't fit in. And so that part of it is hard because I don't just get every weekend free. Yeah.
And spontaneity is non-existent.
No.
Like, my friends are like, come out with us for the weekend. Like, you should have called me like 3 weeks ago.
Yes.
Like, and that's the only way that I can operate is like, you have to give me time to make a decision. Yes. You can't just like say, hey, let's go this, because I'm like, I've already made plans.
Yes. Yeah. And I try as hard as I can, especially with friend stuff. Like, I've got friends that are like, hey, you want to come over today? Or hey, let's go do lunch. And I'm like, but I have 15 sessions to edit right now. Like, I really can't. Mm-hmm. And I put it off yesterday because I did this or did that, or I just won't do my laundry, Mm-hmm. But like, you're right. It's very difficult to be spontaneous.
Yeah. So how do you deal with like stress and anxiety and like being overworked? Like, how do you deal with those feelings?
Not well. No, I'm kidding. I work out like 5 days a week. I'm pretty obsessive about it. I have just taught myself that that's not an option. I love it. Like, that's kind of where I get all my anger out. Like, and I do it's like CrossFit inspired type stuff. So it's like angry workout. Like, and I love that. Like, I feel like that keeps me going, and it gives you more energy. Like, I am so much better of a person because I work out. And we do like once or twice a year, me and him will try to like go away for a weekend, and that's been wonderful. And there were a couple of years where we really didn't do anything like that. And then like he does like concert photography type stuff. So like if it's somebody I like, I'll just go with him. And as long like he does, like he'll go to Nashville and do a shoot, and I'll just tag along. And so like for me, just knowing that like there's times where I just don't have to think about work is really great. And I love every aspect of photography. Like I'm one of the minority of photographers. Like I love editing so much, and I love it all. But like the way my brain works is I'm very like hyper focused on things. And so if I have a list and I've got, you know, to me an overwhelming amount of work on it, I can't stop thinking about it. And so mentally, like it's like you have to train your brain to be like, okay, you've got to let this go and move, you know, focus on being here in the moment. And that's kind of been a challenge to like, and he does a really good job of saying like, you got, you know, you need to chill out, like stop.
It's great to have someone like that in your life to say, hey, like it's gonna be okay, and kind of like, you know, straighten your bearings a little bit.
I don't know how we ended up together, but I say this like all the time. Like when we first met, like neither one of us was doing photography actively. Like we both had, but somehow like we ended up together, and like our personalities match up. Like we're both kind of introverted, and so we really like, I can look at him and I know what he's thinking, and I know like what he's kind of processing in his head, and like I know what his passion is, and I know that he's passionate about certain things. And so like where I've got friends who, when they have their busy seasons, they're like, they want me to quit. Like they're so angry at me because they don't understand. He gets it. Like, and I'm sure he's impatient with me, but he's not going to tell me because he understands that when you love something like you do, and you know, you do have to, like in October, November, that's my busy season. I shoot all of my clients, like basically all of my clients in like a 4-week or 6-week period of time, and they all want sessions. And even I don't even open it up to new clients, and I still like I book up in like 2 hours. And when I open it up, and he understands that, like, and I understand that about him too. So that's really like somehow miraculously we ended up together, and we're like perfect because we get each other. And I mean, we're not perfect, but it's a blessing to have somebody that, and I mean, we'll be like driving down the road looking at the sunset, and we're like, what's that color temperature do you think? And look at the way the lights, like we can be technical, and that's such a blessing to me to like have that to talk to, because, and I've got my photographer friends, but I can say something technical to him, and which he's more technical than I am, but I can say something to him and he gets it, and that's been a lifesaver for sure.
It's very critical because, you know, like I think photographers kind of have it rough in like the relationship department because, you know, our schedules are so chaotic and erratic, and like we could just take off to like another state on a day's notice. And like, you know, if someone is going to be in your life, like they have to understand that, you know, that they love you, but you know, you really love this thing.
Yes.
And it's part of you.
Yes, exactly. And that's what, like I mean, well, even if we go out on like a weekend trip, like I just know that like when we get back, like we're not, if say we get done and I was like, oh, you know, I'm not going to be like, hey, let's go get food or whatever. I'll be like, hey, let's take it home.
Yeah.
Because I get like all he wants to do is sit there and work. And it's the same with me. And it's awesome.
So changing gears a little bit, have you ever hit a point where you're just like, I'm done, I just want to quit, this is just not worth it anymore? Like how did you deal with that?
I really haven't. And I think it's because when I started with newborns, I hated it. And it's because I knew I sucked. Like I knew that like I didn't know how to do it, because it's just, you have to know how to pose. Like it's just different. I've been tired, and sometimes in the really busy, you know, maybe 2 or 3 weeks a year, I'm just like, I'm so over talking to people, and I'm so over like, because when you work, you're on, you know, and and I do really quick sessions. Like I used to do 30-minute mini sessions, and I bumped down to 20 because I can make an extra $3.50 an hour, and that's great. But when I do that, I do kind of lose out on like any sort of break or downtime. And so like I'll even work with an assistant, and they'll bring the client to me, and so it's like nonstop for 3 or 4 hours straight, and that's hard. And then I get home and I'm like, well, I've got like 2,000 pictures to edit, you know, and that for me, like to know that's overwhelming. And when you're doing that 4 nights a week for 2 weeks straight, that's hard. But I've really, aside from my super busy season, I feel like I kind of just have like a good little flow of like, I can take this much on and I can't do this, and you know, I'll turn people down. Because there's only so many weekends or, you know, days in a week.
True. So you manage that by you know, your passion fuels you on a daily basis, but you also like, you know, manage like your workload appropriately.
Yes.
So it's never like overwhelming.
And I find things to do that I'm passionate about. Like if I get bored shooting newborns, well then I'll go like buy something new that, you know, or try new things that I've never tried before. Or if I get bored, you know, doing the same sessions, like I'll take my kids out and do something different and feed myself. And I feel like that, like I do, like the base of my business is, you know, the standard like newborn, cake smash, babies, family, maternity. But then on top of that, it really ends up being almost once a month, I offer some sort of specialty mini sessions. And that's what feeds me, like where I'll be like, okay, what, you know, like I've done glitter mini sessions for 3 years.
I saw those.
They're a lot
really
of fun.
Cute, yeah.
And it's a mess. But then this year, I had a friend who she just started her business, and I've kind of been like mentoring her up. And she was like, well, I bought this pink and blue glitter. And I was like, that's really cool. And I was like, let's try like unicorn. Like, we're going to put like a little unicorn hat on. And so at some point this summer, I'll probably do unicorn glitter mini. And like, she helped me come up with the idea. But like, that's different than what I'm doing. And so I'm going to be really excited about that. Or like, I'll come up with a set that I haven't done before. And that's, for me, that's really exciting to, and you can do anything. Like you can, and once you've done it, like I have so many like normal and consistent clients that like, sometimes I don't necessarily even have to post my set. They're just going to book it because they're like, I know you, I trust you. You've done like all of our pictures, like sure, just do whatever you want to do. And that's cool to me that like my clients trust me to be creative, and they allow me to be fed, just maybe without even realizing it.
Well, going off of that, you seem to have like a very solid relationship with your clients. And I think it's important for the audience to understand, especially in our industry, that, you know, that repeat business is very important to us. And we want to treat our clients like family. We want to take care of them and like over deliver on everything that we do. So, you know, we want them to feel like they want to come back to us.
Yes, I love my clients. Like doing what I do, I have the easiest clients because they're moms. They know that like your kids get sick. Like sometimes my kids will get sick back to back, and I might not. I'm stuck with a baby on my lap, or a kid, not a baby anymore, but a kid on my lap for a week and a half, and I can't touch their pictures, which usually then I'll just like work extra when they're sleeping. But they understand that last minute, sometimes I have to reschedule because my kid wakes up sick, or I'll have a field trip that they, you know, threw on us 2 weeks before, and I'm like, oh, we have this session this day, can we move it? So I don't have to deal with like a bride who really doesn't understand the world yet. And they're like, this is all about me and this is my day. Like for them, they're like, I'm so excited for pictures, but like, you've got a family, I've got a family, I get it. And some of my clients have become my best friends. And like, I try to like, they'll add me on Facebook, or I'll add them. And like, I love seeing their kids grow up. Like I'm genuinely like super attached to my clients, and that's it. It's very, very important. And I feel like going a step above with customer service goes a long way. Like there are photographers who say, okay, I have a 30-minute session, and then when that 30 minutes is up, they're done, whether they got the shot or didn't. Like you were talking about with Olin Mills, and I was talking about with that long newborn mini session. But like that teeny tiny bit of like, for me, 1 hour a week isn't going to I mean, my kids are all in school, so it's not going to like break me, you know, and that going the extra distance in whatever way I can.
Yeah.
I feel like that matters, and not everybody's willing to do that.
They're not. So who would you say is like your ideal client?
Everybody that, I guess everyone, I guess moms, and I have my ideal client. Like, I don't have issues with anybody. Maybe once a year I have to kind of fire a client, but other than that, everybody's just really. People are very easygoing and really understanding and super sweet and grateful. And I feel like I charge enough to where nobody's going to pay $800 to take their newborn pictures for like, and not be like super pumped about it and like super grateful. Mm-hmm. Like it's not like I'm charging like $100 for a newborn session. Right. So I'm only getting people who have really thought this through.
Exactly.
You know?
You have qualified clients.
Yes. Like nobody... Even my mini sessions are over $300, and people aren't. That's not like just throw out money.
No,
you know.
It's not.
And at the beginning, it was a lot harder and people would tell me like it'll get better, like you'll find your thing. But when you're charging a small amount of money, people aren't as grateful. That sounds weird, but like there are different kind of clients. Like there's a photographer for every client and a client for every photographer. Mm-hmm. And when you start, I mean, I did a $25 session, like one of my first sessions. Yeah. And I'm sure she liked the pictures, but like, anybody would like.
Yeah. So I guess what you're trying to say is that, you know, if you charge too little, you become like a commodity rather than something that people value.
Yeah. Or like, there are people who just photographer hop and they don't. There are people who can see the art to it, and there are people who are like, well, I just want to take my kid, I just want my kid's picture taken, and whoever can do it the cheapest, I'm fine.
It's all about the lowest common denominator.
And that's fine, because if they don't see it, then they shouldn't pay $800 for a newborn. Yes, and I'm totally fine with that. Like, and even some of my friends who started out and they used me for years, I might have priced it out of and I'm okay with that. Yeah. And I'm totally fine knowing, like, we're friends, and not like, if it were my best friends, I'd be like, hey, come on. But like an acquaintance or a friend, like, and I get that it may not be a big deal to them. But then I have clients who will save up for 6 months for their newborn session. Mm-hmm. And being priced this high, it really weeds out any sort of like sketchy people, I guess.
Exactly. So you definitely like know who you're going for. How would you say that you attract those kind of clients?
That's a really tough question.
Would you say it's like your marketing strategy, or like just word of mouth helps you find like people from the same tree, so to speak?
Yeah, I think I feel like so in this area that I live in, there's very few people doing what I do. Like this little pocket area. Maybe Birmingham, there's a lot, but I live outside of Birmingham, and there's maybe 3 or 4 of us. And a lot of them, they work also. And so they're more limited on what they can take. And I live in a tiny town, like everybody knows everybody here. And so it's beneficial to, I guess, to have been doing it for so long. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, word of mouth, but I'm just here. Yeah. And people can come to me. But yes, I do market. Like, I'm pretty strategic about how I market. And, the ways, I think it's really important to show yourself off, like marketing wise, like you're selling yourself. You're not I'm selling my work, but people want to know who I am too. Mm-hmm. And that's been really hard for me because I am a private person, but I've kind of every year kind of challenged myself in some area in some way, like put yourself out there this way. And then, like last year, I hated having pictures of me taken. And so I was like, I'm just going to do this. And so like I had friends, like we just traded out like headshots with each other. And basically like I did it like 6 or 7 times just to like get comfortable with it. And then just, I guess, talking about myself this year, it's been kind of hard. And it's really hard too with kids. I want to protect my children. And like now my 11-year-old, some of her friends have social media, which she doesn't, but they can read everything that I'm writing, so I have to be careful with that too, like, because they could go to school and be like, hey, I saw your mom said this about you.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to protect your family, but talk about your family and yourself. But people want to see that, and it's super important. Like, I feel like photographers that are huge, they talk about themselves a lot.
They do, and the conflict you're talking about, I've heard it like time and again from people who are avowed like introverts. Like my own father has said that he's an introvert, but like he's a traveling salesperson.
Yeah. And
he did it because he had to raise a family, take care of his kids. So when the rubber hits the road, you do what you got to do.
Yes.
And I think that learning to socialize and interact with people and share your life is something that you can like learn to do. And like you were saying, that there also needs to be a balance between like how much you share with your life with everyone. Because it's sad to say, but in this day and age, oversharing something can actually be kind of dangerous.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And that's what I'm kind of like coming into now. I've become very strategic about where I share my pictures of my kids. And I've had people come up to me and be like, oh, I recognize your kids. And I'm like, okay, like, which is fine, like, especially in our town, like, but even out of state it's happened. Or even now that I'm posting more pictures of me, that like yesterday somebody was at the gym, they're like, oh, I recognize your face. And I was like, oh, okay.
I got recognized in Guntersville over the weekend.
Yeah, really? Yeah. See, it's crazy that I guess just with social media being what it is, it's out there, but like it's weird to have this like I know you but you don't know me type, and that always freaks me out. Like, and then I'll read articles about how dangerous, especially with like kids stuff is. So like
human trafficking is a very dangerous issue, and like children are very much at risk.
Yes, right now. And that's why I like almost on Instagram, like I'm careful about what I post, because you can't make it private. Like my business page can't be private, and I would love it to be, but I can't.
Yeah.
And unless I go back to a personal, and I can't really do that. And so I've really got to the point where like I'll post a very little bit on my Facebook, but I have a Facebook group, and it's only like 1,800 people, and I've approved every person in that group, and so I'll post their pictures there or on my personal, but it's scary just with a picture can just be taken, you know?
It really is. Well, to kind of change gears to more of like a happy thought.
Yes, that's a very terrifying thought.
What do you think is like the future for you and your business?
Like,
are you happy with how things are going right now? Like, do you have like bigger plans? Like, do you want to scale it up, scale it down?
I love what I do right now. A lot of photographers move from what I'm doing now to teaching, and I'm not a great teacher. Things that I don't explain things well, and I've tried mentoring, and I just don't love it. I don't love teaching, and I'm not patient with people, so I'm patient with my clients, and that, but I love what I do, and every year I try to, I check and make sure I'm making more money or learn how to like be better with my money so that I make more. But I like kind of being a small town photographer. Of course I have like small goals, but I really am so happy where I am right now. And me and Josh have this conversation all the time, like, where do you want to be in 5 years? And the way that we have talked about it is we both kind of say we set goals, we reach them, and then we're like, okay, what's next? And so like it's a good and bad way to live. Like you're never really satisfied with where you go or what you do, because you're like, okay, I checked that off my list. Now I want to do something more. And it's a weird mentality to have, but I kind of like that. Like
I actually do a similar thing, because it's like a never-ending staircase that you climb, and like I'm not even sure if I want to cash out at any point. Just like maybe I'll just keep working until I die.
Yeah.
Because I've seen people. I think that people who like live a long time and have like a healthy mentality, and like their minds are still right, they always have like something that they're doing.
Yes.
But the people who always go downhill quickly, they're the ones who retire and just kind of like veg out on the sofa.
Yep.
And don't do anything.
My great-grandmother lived until she was 94, and she did like crossword puzzles all the time, and she played card games, and like she never stopped. Like and even like my grandma said that they would be driving down the road and she would read every sign, or like every billboard that came, and she was like, at first I was annoyed by it, and then I realized she's doing it to like keep her
keep her mind sharp.
Yes,
Yeah.
and she was like the sharpest person. Like she was making jokes and all that. Like I think that's really important to just never stop, I guess.
So if you could say anything to the audience, like what would you say?
Oh God, I don't know. I don't know.
Like what kind? So like
That's a hard question.
Yeah, just well, to kind of rephrase that, like if you could like send a message to anyone who's interested in like doing like newborn photography or getting into photography, like what would you tell them?
I think for me, the key has been to research everything you're doing, make sure make sure you're doing things safely. To me, that's number one, especially with working with babies and newborns. Work really hard to begin with so that you don't have to later. Never stop learning, never get this pride mentality where like you're not willing to learn, because you can always, every person can learn something else, even the most brilliant person in the world. And I guess, I don't know, is that it?
Yeah, that's some great advice. Well, thanks guys for joining me. This has been Jacob with J&D Photography and Lane. Thank you so much for being on the show. And you've been experiencing Sparking Fire, the podcast for innovative artists and entrepreneurs. I will see you on the next one.